Good day. Welcome to the bauma talk, The Way to Zero Emissions. My name is Riccardo Viaggi, I work for CECE, and I'll be your host today. The way to zero emission is a very major topic of the construction equipment industry, and we at CECE, we are the European Industry Association representing construction machinery manufacturers, are very happy to be associated with the ERA, the European Rental Association, in putting together today's bauma talk. I am we are here at the bauma trade show fairgrounds, where on the 24th of October, this beautiful hall will be filled up with all of you, hopefully all of you, joining, meeting and greeting clients, partners and colleagues. As CECE, we're very pleased to be building this bauma talk today on this very key topic of the way to zero emissions. We have decided to build this bauma talk around the concepts of collaborations and partnerships. Indeed, we know that the way to zero emissions is a huge challenge for the construction equipment industry and for the construction industry altogether. This is why we need to do it in a collaborative approach. And I'm joined by a great panel of experts today that will explain to you how the way to zero emissions has definitely already started, but what we still need to make the full transition, to make the full journey. From the point of view of contractors, I will be joined by Thomas Bauer from the European Construction Industry Federation. He is the past president of FIEC. I will also be joined by the representative of the European Rental Association, Martin Sebastian. And we are, of course, going to hear from a machinery manufacturer. I will be joined by Alexander Greshner of Wacker Neuson. When it comes to zero emission in construction, we know that there is a great role for regulation. And we know that regulation is able to set a timeline, to set a very long-term perspective. And we know that this is the role that industry needs from policy making. And this is why our first speaker today is indeed a representative from the European Commission. I'm joined on stage by Renke Dekharm. You are the permanent representative of the Commission in Munich, and you are going to present to us and to the audience the European Green Deal. I know that you will be explaining to us how the Commission wants Europe to be fit for 55 by 2030. Renke Dekharm, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Riccardo, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me. I think it's very important to be in contact with the industry also on that big project, the European Green Deal. You might have heard of it. What is it? It is Europe's program to become the first climate-neutral continent by 2050. It is very ambitious, hence this is why the Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, coined it as Europe's man on the moon moment. So that's the ambition that we're having as Europe. So you can see in her little quote, the European Green Deal is very ambitious, but it will also be very careful in assessing the impact and every single step we're taking. Let me talk you through a bit what exactly we're looking at in terms of the Green Deal. You can see the figure here. You can see the different sectors that contribute to the big goal of climate neutrality, but also to environment protection more in general. I will pick some of the sectors that are of interest today, and then go more into detail how we implement this. So in terms of mobility, we all know that mobility is a high emitter, so we're looking at solutions for smarter, sustainable mobility. We are preparing industry, we're helping industry on its way to climate neutrality with different strategies and support. We are looking, of course, at something that will be very interesting for our audience today, Riccardo, that is making homes more efficient. So this will be the European Renovation Wave that we're looking at, because we know the building sector is a big emitter of emissions. Russia's war on Ukraine that started this year has had its impact on several aspects of the European Green Deal, on which I will come back later. But let me emphasize that is, of course, promoting clean energy. That is something that we're looking at now to become independent of fossil fuels. But it's also about agriculture, because we have seen that we are dependent to some extent on imports, but agriculture can also contribute a lot to achieving the goals of the Green Deal. We're also looking at the financing, of course, because all this costs money, and we know it's not only it's not possible to do this only with public money, but we also need private investment. I'll come back to that later as well. And that is very important to us too. We want to ensure a just transition for all. We look at some sectors, some regions, some individuals that have a bigger burden to carry, and we want to support them from the European side. So how do we do this? This all sounds nice, but we also have presented a very concrete set of proposals to implement the Green Deal and to really put it into action. We called it the Fit for 55 package, because to reach that goal of climate neutrality by 2050, we said that the way needs to be to reach a 55% reduction in emissions by 2030 as compared to 1990. In July 2021, we presented a package of legislative proposals that paved that way, and this year in 2022 we're just discussing them and implementing them. I want to pick out some examples because this was your interest really in having it really concrete. What is it that we are proposing? What is it that we're implementing? You all are familiar with the EU emissions trading system by now, I think. It has been criticized in the beginning for not being strict enough. I think now we have all come to grips with it. Frans Timmermans, the responsible executive vice president of the Commission, summarizes it nicely here on that slide. We put a price on CO2 emissions, we create a strong price signal for green investments, and we spur the markets to develop cost-efficient solutions. So it's not us telling industry what machine they have to buy, what production line they have to change. It's us internalizing the costs that are so far externalized, so that industry can adapt and reduce emissions in a way that makes sense for them. So that is a very market-based approach, and we have seen its success, and we want to build on that. We want to reduce the total number of certificates. We want to reduce the number of free certificates so that we see a controlled price increase. I know that we have seen in the last year some hiccups with the energy prices. These are not due to the emissions trading system, but we are of course aware of that, that we don't want to overdo it. Yeah, but we want to have a foreseeable increase in the price of emissions. What we're also doing, and here that is interesting for our audience today, is that we want to include two new sectors in the emissions trading system, that is buildings and transport. For some countries that is no news. For example, in Germany we had that already beforehand, but for other countries this is news. Now we of course want to protect European industry in that sense, that we don't want them to suffer from the higher emission prices that they have to pay here in comparison to others. We don't want carbon leakage to happen. This is why we have proposed the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which simply puts the price that the production would have had to pay in Europe on an imported product, so that we have a level playing field. And this also gives an incentive to other countries, to other global actors to come up with similar systems to reduce emissions. We want to increase the share of renewables from 22% to initially 40%. Now I'll come back to that later in reaction to the war. We have increased that already very ambitious goal to 45% by 2030. I will outline in a bit how we want to do this. Being in Germany, Ricardo, I cannot omit this one, that is we want to reduce the CO2 emissions from cars. That is totally by 2035, but only a 55% reduction by 2030. Now, don't be nervous, we are talking about passenger cars and vans here. We are well aware that for some industrial applications this is not possible. Electric vehicles might not be the best solutions, also in the farming sector. Here we are rather looking at e-fuels as the way forward, also in the aviation industry. But this cannot be unmentioned because it is a big part of that package. Now, let's talk about money. We put our money where our mouth is. We take public money. We have come up with the biggest ever spending program of the EU, that is Next Generation EU. In reaction to the COVID crisis, we took loans in total of 800 billion that can finance the green and the digital transition. But we are also looking at private investment, and here the taxonomy has made some waves earlier this year. This is a classification exercise where we simply tell investors, private investors, what can be seen as a sustainable investment, what can be seen as a transition investment, and what not. So this is simply a guidance for investors so that they can look into how to invest green. Now, as I mentioned before, Putin's war on Ukraine earlier this year, that began in February, changed things. It, of course, gave another European perspective to Ukraine. You can see here President Zelensky and President von der Leyen talking about the EU accession of Ukraine, but it also accelerates our work on the Green Deal, because it has become not only a climate program, it is also a geostrategic program when it comes to becoming independent of Ukraine, of Russian fossil fuels. And here is why we increased our targets for renewable energies. We want to pool our resources, we want to be stronger together, we want to be more efficient, but we also want to really build up our own capacity. So here's the Green Deal. I think it is clear that it can only be done together with industry, and I look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Renke Dekkarm. One specific question I wanted to ask you is the global perspective in here, because we know that policy making at the European level is set by the European Commission. We know that industry, on the other hand, most of the time plays on a global scale. So what are we discussing here at European level that can be brought at the global level? What is the European Commission doing to lead by example, but also convince our global partners that the way to zero emission is the right way?
Mm-hmm. I think there are several aspects. We can see in the international negotiations that Europe has a big role, has a big voice. We saw that with the Paris Agreement, that both the member states but also the EU played a very important role in brokering this deal. We can see that by setting the example, by leading the way, by saying we want to become the first climate neutral continent, we have kind of started a competition, and we see other countries saying, yes, that's actually the way forward, and also setting their goals, being more ambitious. And I've talked about the Green Deal as a very holistic approach, and this also applies to basically all our policies, but then also to trade agreements, to our international agreements, to our talks with partners. So whatever we do, it is something that is automatically included. When we agree, when we discuss on trade agreements, we also discuss climate issues. So I think it's very important to partner up, because Europe can lead the way, but Europe cannot do it alone.
Thank you. And when you say partnering up, from the European Commission point of view, what do you make of these dialogue occasions like bauma, like a very big trade show is? What is the type of dialogue that you expect from industry? We're, of course, very happy to have the European Commission at the bauma talk today, but what are the type of dialogue and the dialogue occasions that we can create between policymakers and industry players?
It is very important for us because, we are very ambitious when it comes to the Green Deal, but we also want to remain realistic. So there's no use in proposing targets that nobody can achieve. So it's important to be in a dialogue that is in our policy-making process, where we have implemented several possibilities to enter in a dialogue in the last years, but it's also in these personal meetings where we can just, see the atmosphere, feel a bit what the plans are, how the industry is approaching this issue, and also gaining some ideas on what we could do to support.
And last but not least, in the part of the Green Deal is the Renovation Wave, which has a very strong focus on buildings, the role of buildings in their operation. What is in a little bit more details the Renovation Wave? What can you tell our audience about the Renovation Wave?
Mm-hmm. We see that buildings are in fact one of the big emitters in Europe, and we see that the renovation is not as quick as it could be done. So we want to increase the renovation rate from 1% to 2% throughout Europe. So there's a big opportunity to simply reduce emissions, and it's a big opportunity to implement the new European Bauhaus. This is what President von der Leyen coined as the soul of the Green Deal, because this is not only about regulation, about funding, but it's also about bringing Europeans together, bringing architects together, bringing artists together to discuss how can the building of the future look like? How do we need to adapt our style of building, and how can we create something like the Bauhaus in the past century? How can we create something that is valuable and gives really a soul to our climate ambitions? And I think that is a very interesting way forward. That will also where we have the industry as a key partner.
Indeed, the concept of collaboration, partnerships that come again on top of our table. Very, very strong message also from the European Commission. We, as industry, really appreciate that. One last question. Going back to the presentation, the Green Deal as a long-term goal-setting exercise. What are the key moments? When can we expect certain regulations to be in place? To apply, if we can give a little bit more information on the timelines to industry, because as you know, we said it, policy making is about setting long-term goals. How long-term are they? How short-term are they?
It's difficult to speak in general terms. I think really one key milestone was July 2021 when we presented that package, and now we saw over the summer that some of the aspects were already agreed upon, and there are dates put upon the regulations and directives that we come up with. I think 2030, 2035 are very important milestones for some. I talked about the emissions standards for cars. I talked about the renewable energy. I think these are the time spans we are looking at. But we all know the climate change is happening, so anything that we can do now, it's better to start today than tomorrow.
Very well said. Thank you very much, Renke Dekkarm from the European Commission. I hope you can stay with our audience on the comments section with some interaction with our audience. Once again, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
When we speak about zero emission and the way to zero emission in construction, of course, one of the major role is the contractors. One of the major impact is the impact that contractors, builders can have. And I am, to look at that, I am joined today by no one better than the past president of FIEC, the European Construction Industry Federation, but, and most of all, I would say, a contractor, a long-time CEO of a major contractor group, Thomas Bauer from the Bauer Group. Let's hear, you're going to, in a nutshell, but you're going to give us an overview of what construction processes are and how we can lead the way to zero emissions by looking holistically at the whole construction picture. You have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ricardo. Actually, I think the most important message at the beginning of explaining that is to know that construction in total accounts for about 40% of all CO2 emissions in the world. And this is a very, very big reason that we have to do everything in our industry to reduce that in the coming years, because without construction, it is not going to happen. If you talk about the CO2 emission reduction, you have to talk about 4 points. Actually, the first point is how we reduce CO2 by our own work, so by doing the construction work on job sites. Actually, this is about 20% of the total CO2 emissions in construction. We have to talk about our people, that's their transport, offices, heating, computers, construction machines, fuel usage of these machines, efficiency of the machines, workshops and whatever. The second big item is material for construction. It actually accounts for a lot of CO2 emissions, and the material you choose is a big reason for having less or more. Third thing, we have to talk about transportation of the materials, machines, people, and last but not least, indirectly, what happens when the buildings are finished, the whole life cycle, the heating, the repair, whatever happens in the building until demolition of the building. Let me talk about those items. First, our own work. Actually, I think this is quite clear. You can achieve a lot by electric mobility, by electric machines, by better heating systems in our offices, emission-free offices, but also at the end of the day, maybe some compensation for unavoidable CO2 emissions and a lot of other things. The second and third item is materials and transportation. Actually, most important in the reduction efforts is the reduction efforts of our suppliers, who have to reduce CO2 emission of their supplies and services. In our own work, big portion is design. Actually, if we design the building in the right way, they use much less CO2, and it's also the construction methods which can reduce CO2 a lot. Let me give some examples in design. Actually, in very advanced design methods like honeycomb structures, you can reduce a lot of construction material. In a honeycomb structure, you need much less concrete as an example, or much less steel, but on the other side, it needs more work. So it can be a little bit more expensive on the other side, but I think this is what we will have to afford. This is just a sketch of a honeycomb structure. I think many people know that, but it needs less material, but more work to do that. Some more examples: digitalization. Actually, the digitalization of design helps a lot to be very efficient in the usage of material and also to bring it all together. Also, you can use existing structures for a new building. You don't take the building the old one completely away. You use part of it for the new building. This reduces a lot of CO2. Or in the foundation part of the building, you can use geothermal activation and use the heat in the ground for the heating of the building. This is just an example, a mixed-in-place wall for using the thermal heat in the ground. You see the pipes which go to heat pumps, and then you can heat with this the building. Or you can use alternative methods of construction. In my area, we do foundations. We use mixed-in-place walls instead of diaphragm walls, which reduces the material consumption tremendously. Or for diaphragm walls, instead of cutting the joints, you can use rubber joints and also reduce material usage. This is an example of a mixed-in-place system. On the right-hand side, you see a machine with augers. When these augers drill down into the ground, you add cement slurry, and the cement slurry, you mix it with the existing ground, which produces kind of a concrete, and you have a concrete which you produce in the ground, and you use the ground as additives for it. And this reduces tremendously the amount of material which is used on a job site. This is just an example of a real job site which we have done. Actually, we decided not to do a diaphragm wall, and we decided to a mixed-in-place wall, which is the lower part of the sketch. And you can see in the diaphragm wall would have used 3,000 trucks to supply to the job site and 2,700 trucks to get disposal from the job site. And the mixed-in-place wall only used 750 trucks for supplying the job site and 350 trucks to do the disposal from the job site. A huge change. The last thing to talk about is the period of using of the building. Actually, this period is very much influenced by the design of the building and how we build it. Because if you build a building in a way that you need very little repair, that the materials can be used circular after the end of a building, that heating systems are correct, and there's a lot of things to be looked at. But I think we have to look perfectly at the usage time of the building while we build the building, that CO2 usage gets less. The big question is how to achieve all of this. What should politics do? Actually, my personal opinion is that the most important thing is that we use the automatism of the market process. It must be an advantage to everybody involved in the construction process to achieve CO2 reduction. CO2 reduction must be made an element of competition. This is also the most important trigger for innovation. Innovation needs the market system, and we cannot only work with rules and regulations, but we also need rules and regulations. They must stimulate reduction of CO2 footprints, but the most important thing is to organize the market in the right way. Hopla.
Thank you very much, Thomas Bauer. You, of course, are the past president of FIEC, FIEC being a Brussels-based industry organization representing the construction contractors and engaging in discussions. Can you tell us a little bit more, what is the role, the work, the mission of FIEC in this way to zero emissions?
Actually, FIEC is the big organization for the construction industry in Europe. We represent all construction federations in Europe. It's around 32 organizations, and we are stationed in Brussels. Actually, what is behind this organization is huge. It's about 6.6% of the total employment in Europe. It's about 30% of the industrial employment in Europe. So construction is a big chunk of it, and it's about 3 million companies. And we work towards the European organizations, the Parliament, the Commission, and the policy making of Europe to help producing law which makes sense and which is good for our industry, which is good to achieve the goals which we have to achieve.
And in a similar perspective, from a global point of view, what do you think is this policy making Europe into a leader with no followers, into a leader that is losing ground, maybe even losing competitiveness on the global scale? You are at the head of a large international group as a contractor. What do you think is the global perspective here?
Actually, for myself, CO2 reduction is an absolute must. So we don't need to discuss about this because we have this problem and we have to solve this problem. And the stronger ones have to lead the process. And I think Europe is part of the stronger ones. There's fortunately some others in the world, but we really have to move this process. I'm not sure if this will also be to our advantage. Sometimes it will. Maybe we will get a competitive edge. We will be in advance of the others. But also others will try to copy us. This is also very clear. So we have to try also to safeguard our knowledge, to make good patents. And that not the same thing happens what happened with solar panels. Some time ago, Germany was the biggest solar panel producer, and today we are very far behind. So I think we have to be very careful. This new development, we have to be careful to organize it well. If we organize it well, it will be an advantage, and if we don't, it will be a disadvantage. So let's all work well.
Very important to hear your commitment. Is this commitment or is this inevitability shared by your colleagues also around the FIEC table?
Yes, I think everybody on the table is talking just like me, and we all know we have to do it. Actually, a lot of things which have to be done in the next 30 years, we don't know yet. Because I think a lot of innovation has to still happen in the next 30 years until we really achieve zero emissions. But I'm quite sure this is possible. If you look at the last 30 years of innovation and you just think the same amount of innovation will happen in the next 30 years, it will happen, and everybody is convinced about that.
Thank you. And last but not least, the Bauer Group is, of course, a big contractor group, but also a manufacturer of machine. How do you see, from your special point of view of a dual role, how do you see the way to zero emissions?
We, as the Bauer Group, we are working in a very special field, which is foundation. And foundation is tremendously dependent on equipment, because equipment is our work. The work is done by equipment, much more than in other areas of construction. And this kind of work needs the knowledge of both sides. So in our company, we try to take the advantage of being knowledge as a contractor and as an equipment manufacturer, and we put it both together in technical development. So this is our way of doing it. Other companies are doing it different, but I think ours is quite successful.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Thomas Bauer, for joining me on stage. I hope you can stay with our audience for some interactions in the comments section. And once again, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
So on the way to zero emission in construction, the role of larger rental companies, large or small, rental companies and fleet managers is of course central. We have partnered on this webinar with the European Rental Association, and I'm joined now on stage by a representative of ERA, Martin Sebastian. You're working for Zeppelin and you are the chairman of the Technical Commission of the European Rental Association. So you are the best place to explain to us the role of rental companies in the way to zero emissions. You have the floor.
Thank you, Ricardo. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to show you how rental contributes to achieve net zero emissions in the future. Please let me explain you this in detail in the following steps. Rental is inherently circular and sustainable. Renting is more sustainable than ownership from life cycle perspective, and rented machinery is green. Let's start with a shared usage. The construction companies can access equipment from the rental companies when required. The centralized ownership leads to a more frequent and therefore more efficient use of the equipment. Repairability. The rental companies contribute to a product design facilitating maintenance and repair activities. We also focus on the spare parts management and ask for increased information on product repairs from the equipment manufacturers. Resource use. We search for equipment to offer the most sustainable option for our customers and provide theoretical and practical trainings to our customers to optimize the use of equipment. Reusability. Components, attachments of the dismantled construction equipment can be reused. Recyclability. Rental companies take care of their equipment by repairing when it is still possible. In case of light equipment, we try to focus on equipment with high recycling possibilities at the end of its life cycle. In case of larger machines, used sales are offering the equipment a second life. When you look at the carbon footprint of machines, it's necessary not only to look at the emissions that are emitted by the machine during its operation hours. It is more important to look at the whole life cycle. Then you discover that in most cases, renting is much better from a carbon footprint perspective. One of the reasons for that is that the rental companies can optimize transportation of machines to the job site or make rental equipment even available on the job site. ERA developed an independent online tool, the equipment CO2 Calculator, which you can see here, that allows different elements of CO2 usage in a whole life cycle and that demonstrate that CO2 emissions of construction machinery mainly comes from transportation and energy use. The calculator allows the user to compare different scenarios and to make the right decision about the type of equipment on transportation and on fuel used. More and more modern machines running on electricity and on other alternative fuels such as HVO or hydrogen are already available on the rental market today. The drive towards greener equipment is fueled by both regulations such as EU Green Deal legislation or low emission zones in cities, as well as by request of customers. Telematics-enabled machines provide transparency with data, so it is possible to see how exactly a machine got used, which gives it information on the emission during operation hours. Rental companies can provide such data to customers to improve their carbon footprint. Always the right piece of equipment for the job. By renting, you ensure that exactly the right piece of equipment sourced locally is put to use, not too big that you are wasting resources and not too small that the job is taking longer than you need. And it's going to be well maintained, increasing its efficiency and lifetime while increasing its emissions. What do rental companies expect from the OEMs is a big question. Work with us on transparency and share telematic data with us. Use the ERA equipment CO2 calculator and help the equipment users making decisions. Help to understand your strategies related to zero emissions so that we can better advise our customers. As explained earlier, sharing of telematic data can have a positive impact on sustainability. No need to reopen the question of data ownership here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. As a representative of the rental companies, you've explained that you have developed a CO2 equipment calculator as ERA. I would like to understand if there are already numbers about its usage and what these numbers, if something, can tell you already.
Yeah, thank you. The usage is quite beneficial. So we have 8,000 page views already. 5,000 or 60% of the visits relate to the CO2 calculator. 400 completed the CO2 calculations already. 24% of the users are coming from Western Europe, 13% are coming from Southern Europe, 11% are coming from Eastern, and 10% from Northern Europe. We have also seen that 30% of the rental companies are using the CO2 calculator, 30% of the OEMs, and 40% of others.
If I understand correctly, the main finding of the CO2 calculator is that everything around process and operations of the job site and of the machine impact on the job site is the real point where we can make gains, or we can make savings with transportation and job site organization. And you seem to imply that rental companies have a better way of managing this. Can you explain this a little bit better?
Exactly. So with this, you can see the whole way. So you can see the whole construction process, and you can compare the different type of equipment. So you can then decide which is the best model to choose to save CO2 emission.
Thank you. And let's also speak to our audience. Sometimes when we speak about the way to zero emissions, people imply or tend to understand that it's all about electrification. You as rental companies or as an ERA, as an association, do you think that this is the only way, or do you see other alternative energy sources as potential?
So I think at the moment, battery or using batteries or using electricity is a start. And we also see that this is only an intermediate process. So there will be something after. Maybe for the smaller equipment, this will last for a long time, but especially for larger equipment, so for large excavators or large wheel loaders, you need to have another solution, because the battery packs would be too big and too expensive to work with. So this is why we think that there will be, maybe hydrogen will be the next step in the future. So we see that many OEMs work on this topic already, and we are really keen to see what will be available or what will be shown during bauma by the OEMs.
Indeed, and we as CECE completely share that perspective because there are different energy sources available. We know that also when we talk to policymakers, we always talk about technology neutral decisions and policies, so that if the policymakers, let's say, point to the direction, then it's up to industry to decide how to get to that end goal. Staying on the topic of OEMs and how you mentioned certain things you expect from OEMs, but what about the differentiation of these systems and these technologies? You expect some form of standardization, if I understand correctly. In what way do you think that could work?
Yes, so for the technical committee, one of our key facts is standardization. And when you see today, when you look into the car industry, for example, you see there is one standard already to recharge the cars. And this is something, of course, we try to discuss and achieve together with the OEMs to have one standard as well. Not to have different kinds of possibilities to load the machines, because it must be easy to do this on a job site and at a rental branch for us as a rental company, and of course for the customers to do this at their sites. Another important point for us is a change of training. So training is another point which is really important for us, and we know that with a change from diesel-driven machines to machines with electricity, you need to have a different kind of technician. So this is something we work together with the OEMs to achieve better answers on how can we get our technicians prepared for the future. And another point is a BIM standard. So we work on the BIM standard, not only for diesel-driven machine, also for the equipment which is electric related. And of course, we try to work on complete solutions for the future, not only to work on the machine itself, so to have a complete solution for the customer, and the customer knows or has the possibility to recharge the machine on the site. So it's not only the machine, it's a battery pack as well.
In one last question, in this concept of partnership and collaboration, you mainly referred, rightfully so, I believe, to the partnership that you have, or that you're building, and that you have with OEMs. What about the partnership with the final customers, with the final users? What about contractors? Where do you see the challenge? Where do you see the potential in your relationship as a rental company or as a rental sector to the contractors?
So of course we try to get as many information from our customers, from the contractors, and use them in the discussion we have with the OEMs, just to excuse me, just to bring this up and to show what our customers need, what we need, what the customers need, so to have the whole line. And of course to work together with CECE, as we did already, to work with the OEMs, with the customers, and for all the European rental companies.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you for this question, these answers. I hope you can stay with us and with the audience in the interaction and the comment section. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Riccardo.
So talking about the way to zero emission in construction, we are, of course, looking at the role of machine builders, machine manufacturers. And I am very pleased to be joined on stage here now by Alexander Greschner from Wacker Neuson. Alexander, you represent a very relevant OEM that is about and has decided already what is the way to zero emissions. Let us and let the audience understand how you as Wacker Neuson perceive and how you want to lead the way to zero emissions. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Riccardo. Yeah, from our side, it's clear. You saw some movie pictures before that showed already history. These are real job sites out in Europe where full coverage with zero emission products is able and possible. And I would like to go a little bit with you through our first 7 years journey as Wacker Neuson, when we introduced our first machines, where we are now. And I think more important, looking forward to bauma, where the future will take us. As I said, years ago we started, 7 years ago we introduced the first machinery with battery power on our light and compact equipment. For us was a very crucial moment or very crucial fact from the very beginning on these products that we have no compromise. What does it mean? You, as a user, as an owner, you have the same performance, you have the same functionality, you can work a full day on a job site with these machines. So that was kind of stage one. Every machine that we launched needed to go out there without any compromise on performance. After a couple of years, I would say 2019, we started to introduce a full range. It's clear it's not enough to put one electric machine on a job site and all the surrounding products on such site are still with diesel or other energies. So our ambition was after the introduction now to really generate a complete range that covers small and medium-sized job sites, which we then introduced piece by piece into the market. And I would say today we can kind of proudly present a complete range to do so, all on battery power, starting with machines to open the ground, also excavators, machines to transport and handle material with wheel loaders in different ways, with dumpers to transport wheeled and tracked machines, and then a whole lot of smaller equipment that we can use to compact again soil or concrete on battery power. Also the ambition is still there from the very beginning. We want to be obviously ecological. We want to be and we have to be economically reasonable. That means we need to find a solution that our customers can also make business and economic sense out of this. And the opportunity, I think it's an opportunity, it's not a must, but it's an opportunity. It's the user friendliness that today we have the ability with electric machines to really have the plug and play situation on many models that makes it much easier for our users to work with this. So remember, no compromise was stage 1. The full range to cover a site was stage 2. And we, shortly before bauma, obviously give a little outlook here. You see a bit in dust on that on that slide. You can see what's coming to complete the range. There will be a telescopic handler on the same battery power that we have our other compact machines on. Plus we will have large compaction plates again on the same battery packs like all our other small products. So outlook for bauma, an invitation to see more about this. Where are we now? And bauma is maybe for us not a game changer, but it's a special moment for us regarding timing. It's where we want to go in stage 3 of our, I would say, evolving strategy on zero emission. Beside having the product, beside having the range, obviously it's not enough to run a job site. You need to think about what we call a 360-degree ecosystem, symbolically shown in that cycle here, where we say around our product we need to offer a lot more solutions that were probably not typical for an OEM manufacturer in the last years. So we need to find ways how to charge. In the past, somebody brought the diesel fuel to the job site. Who brings enough electricity to the job site to run machines? Who brings enough hydrogen to job sites to run machines with this? How is servicing, operating working? We need high voltage mechanics, less or more than diesel mechanics in the future. We need different education. We need solutions on the commercial side and so on. So when we go through this on the commercial side, obviously there are classics in the market with rental. Rental is evolving, is developing. It's the first type of sharing in our industry, and this sharing methodology will really, in our mind, develop much further to make sure that we find, again, economic solutions for customers. If we go into operating, again, it has to be simple. The diagnosis on batteries is extremely important. We need to understand in what condition is a machine, in what condition is the battery. The big opportunity on this is electric powered machine has much less mechanical parts. It's a zero maintenance machine in our mind. We have no more liquids that we have to maintain. We have no more V-belts. We have no more mechanical parts. We can do a lot less effort on the job site and keep the machine up and running. Plug and play, I mentioned, if you take small machines, you can see that probably during the bauma show on many booths and at many exhibitors, it's plug and play. It's press a button, a machine runs, press the button, a machine stops. There is no more throttle in between, there is no warming, there is no other mechanical things that we are used to have on other machines. It's really a very much simplified use. The big point is charging, and there we will have to bring solutions. You see a little sketch here, something also coming out. It's a mobile charger, a big power bank that is able to charge mobile battery, but also to plug in excavators and others to make sure that there is energy supply on the job site. It's not from the grid to the job site, it's really on the job site to the machine to make sure power is supplied. And last but not least, a big thing also in, I think in general in this sustainable context, is a cyclic solution. An excavator, whatever you buy from us or anybody today, has a lifetime of 10 to 15 years. A battery probably will not have the performance in 10 to 15 years from now. So you need to find ways how you keep the excavator alive by changing batteries in the system during this lifespan. And then obviously a battery is way too valuable just to dispose it. We need to find ways what to do with the battery. And on the very little sketch that you hopefully can recognize on your screen, we try to reuse these batteries coming out of the excavators after 3 to 5 years, put them back into power banks where it's not crucial if the battery has a 100% or only a 80% performance. So all of this is basically around our classic situation that we have where we did build machines in the past, and now we really have a more cyclic approach.
Thank you. Very insightful indeed. Alexander Grechner, you representing Wacker Neuson, an OEM, so indirectly a member of CECE. From your own industry association at European level, what do you expect? What do you think is the role on the way to zero emissions for CECE?
I think for us as a CECE, us as a manufacturer, and basically all the players in the value chain of a construction process, it's very important to integrate and cooperate in the next years. It starts when we speak specifically on CECE. There are wishes obviously to support us on the policy side. We need obviously to make sure that also our industry, being rather small compared to automotive, plays a role in the thoughts and in the forward-going ideas of Brussels, saying simply. We also obviously look into standardization. It will be not very helpful if every OEM manufacturer obviously develops his own plug or his own charging way. So we need standardization. We need authorities that help us to bring standards up and support us in a good way to do so. So there is a lot in it that we can probably expect or hope for and work together on.
Thank you. And in your presentation of already reality, of course, we know that Wacker Neuson focuses on electrified machines, battery electric. But what do you think is the role of other alternative energy sources?
I think we had a simpler life than many of the heavy equipment manufacturers because we make light equipment, we make compact equipment. Most of our focus is in performance ranges of 20, maximum up 50 kilowatt, and there is a good way to cover this with battery electric power. It's also obviously easier today to run a battery electric machine somewhere because power supply electricity is typically in some way or the other already available. It is clear to us that if we go to the higher end of our product range, or if I speak more general about heavier equipment, there need to be other solutions, and hydrogen for sure is one thing we also follow beside our battery platforms. But again, hydrogen is not as far evolved yet as battery and electricity is. So the big question will be again charging. How will be hydrogen provided really on job site, and how we will make sure that there is enough running times on machines based on hydrogen. Yeah.
And the rental companies are a major player in all this. You referred to the rental business being the first type of sharing in our industry. How do you cope with the expectations of these players when it comes, for example, to data sharing, when it comes to organization of a job site with new alternative energy sources?
I think they are an extremely important player in this value chain that I mentioned. The rental companies were the origin of sharing. The sharing economy started with the rental industry. They are developing. The sharing will become more transparent, will become more probably digital. It will go on platforms, and platforms automatically mean we need interfaces, we need transparency between the different players. So we are extremely interested that we are able to network in a real meaning, not only discussing and talking with rental companies, but network in a digital way that that our machines can talk to these rental platforms, that we are really connected, that we are able to be faster in finding machines for customers, to be able to drive utilization up on these machines, also put more hours per year on these machines. Because again, it's also an economical way we need to follow here, and utilization itself already provides more income, obviously, on the same asset. And I think this is one very important key. How can we create more utilization? And the only way is openness. So we will have to, and we want to be open. And I think I'm not only speaking for Wacker Neuson as a company. I think it's across manufacturers that we are really open in this vertical value chain integration to be more transparent and open with the rental businesses.
Thank you very much, Alexander Greschner, for taking the stage and for this Q&A. I hope you can stay with the audience in the comments section. Once again, thank you very much. This is a wrap-up on our topic of the day. We looked at the way to zero emissions. I hope this gave you insight, but I most of all hope this gave you curiosity and interest to join bauma on the 24th, from the 24th to the 30th of October. In order to wrap up, stay with us a few more minutes. In order to wrap up, I am joined on stage by the head of bauma, Nicole Schmidt. Nicole, why don't you give us a little bit of a flavor, an overview of why nobody should miss bauma this year?
Thank you, Ricardo. Well, let me start with what makes bauma special. It's actually the community of over 3,000 companies, international companies, showing world novelties, showing new solutions, discussing the hottest topics within the industry. Coming from sustainability, which was also on the panel today, going to shortage of skilled workers, which is one of the biggest challenges in the industry, digitization, but also what makes mining, how can we make mining sustainable? Zero emission, we just had it. And I think the biggest part for bauma 2022 will also be the matching opportunity with startups. So we will have at least 46 startups in the Innovation Hall Lab Zero. And the Innovation Hall Lab Zero, you had the talk today, and we're happy that you are also at bauma, will also host the forum. So all the hot topics which I mentioned will be displayed and discussed and whatever, back and forth on the forum in the Innovation Hall Lab Zero. As this is the last bauma talk before we open the show floor in October, I would like everybody to be sure and make sure that your calendars are blocked. Get registered. bauma will take place 24th until 30th of October. And last but not least, let me say a big thank you to the VDMA who did a huge engagement for the bauma talks, altogether 5. And thank you, Ricardo, for this 5th bauma talk, being our host from the CEC side, and also for all the contribution you're putting into bauma. So join us at bauma, the heartbeat of the industry.
Thank you, Nicole. That indeed wraps up our bauma talk. Thank you for staying with us. Indeed, rendezvous to bauma 24th to 30th of October.